There are so many different ways to mount remote folders on Ubuntu. There is SMB, NFS, it can be confusing. Rclone is my preferred way of doing it, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I do it. What's up, Geek Army? Anand here once again. I hope you can see what I'm doing here. I am taking you guys through a story. First, I showed you a preview of my home lab, what devices I use. Then I showed you how to set up Docker in an unprivileged Proxmox LXC running Ubuntu server. And in this video, we're going to go one level up and mount some remote folders for us to use later. And what's coming later? It's the ultimate Docker media server video. So like, subscribe, do all that good stuff so you don't miss out on the rest of the story. Of course, it would really help me out as well. Back to the topic. I am using an unprivileged Proxmox LXC running Ubuntu server. You could be using Ubuntu or Debian in any environment, including bare-bones system, and this video will work exactly the same for you. So the big question, how do you mount remote folders inside your Ubuntu system? In my case, I have all my files in my Synology NAS and I'm trying to mount them inside this Proxmox LXC. I could use SMB or NFS in an Ubuntu server. They have worked great for me for years, but there are a few reasons why I don't like it, and I will explain later in this video. If you're using an unprivileged LXC like I do, there is one more problem. Unprivileged LXCs do not allow mounting SMB and NFS shares. So how do we solve this problem? You can mount the remote folder in your Proxmox host and pass it through to the LXC container as bind mounts, and this is explained in Proxmox documentation. But I don't like this for a few reasons. Of the main one being I do not like to mess with my Proxmox host. So this is the reason why I prefer using Rclone to mount my remote SMB share inside my Ubuntu server, which is running in an unprivileged Proxmox LXC. But before we go to that, let me know how you guys do it. Where are your stuff stored? How do you mount them? Let me know in the comment section. What is Rclone? Rclone is this awesome application that allows mounting several different remote folders on your system. As you can see in their documentation right here, there are many different storage providers, most of which are cloud storage providers. In fact, this is a common misconception because Rclone allows mounting more than just cloud storage providers. So if you really scroll down here, you can see that it supports SMB and CIFS, which is what we're going to use today. So we'll start with mounting my SMB share from my Synology NAS inside my Proxmox LXC running Ubuntu server. And as always, at the end of the video, I will share some of the advantages of doing it this way. So if you really want to learn, stick around till the end. We will start off where we left at the end of my last video, which was creating a Proxmox LXC called UDMS, Ultimate Docker Media Server. Here you can see I am in my Proxmox web interface on the LXC container that was created. Again, your Ubuntu server or Debian server could be anywhere. In this example, I'm just using the LXC container. So first thing we're going to do is go over to options. Now, this only applies to Proxmox LXCs. If you are running Ubuntu server in a virtual machine or bare bones, you don't have to do any of this stuff. But for unprivileged LXCs, we're going to edit the features and we're going to enable keyctl and fuse. This is needed. While we are here, we're going to do one other thing. We're going to go over to resources and we're going to attach a new mount point or a disk for Rclone cache, which is not needed, but it's a nice to have because it improves performance. So we're gonna create a disk 256 gigabytes and we're gonna mount it on media/cache. Again, you could pick any path that you would like inside your Proxmox LXC. I'm picking media/cache. We're gonna disable backup because I don't care about cache if we lost it. We're also going to skip replication. I usually like to enable ACLs for better permissions compatibility, and I also like to enable no A time because I don't want the access times to be recorded, unnecessary IO, so I do not like those options. If you're in an Ubuntu server in a bare bones environment, you don't really need to do this. You could just create a folder for Rclone cache and you can limit the size in Rclone config, as you would see, how much space should it be using depending on the size of your hard drive. So for now, let's create this and let's attach this. It should take a few seconds. You will see an error probably. There you go. So there is an error. Even with the error, the mount point was created, as you can see. I will have to restart this LXC container and everything works. So I really have no idea what that error was about. So I'm going to restart my LXC right there and come back and continue. All right, the LXC restarted. I already am SSH'd into this LXC container from my SSH client, Mobax term. So we enabled the Fuse in the Proxmox config, but if we'll have to install the Fuse package, this also applies to Ubuntu or Debian. So we're going to do sudo apt install Fuse 3, not to be confused with Fuse, which is also another package. And then we're going to type in the password. And there you go. So in this case, I already had it installed, so it's not being installed. But if yours is a fresh system, you will see that the package will be installed. There's one thing that we'll have to do, which is a minor configuration change. So we're going to do sudo nano /etc/fuse.conf. This opens the configuration file for Fuse. We're going to enable allow other. This option allows users other than myself to access the files that will be our folders that will be mounted using Rclone. This can be a security risk in a shared environment, but we're in a home lab. I want Docker to use all the files that I'm going to mount on my username, so I'm going to enable this feature. It should be okay. Okay, save and exit, and we're done with that part. The next step is to install Rclone, and for this we're going to head over to Rclone documentation right there. The link to this page will be in the description below. So right down here you can see the one-line install script. Some people don't like one-line install scripts as they can be a security risk. In this case, I've tried it. Many people online have tried it as well. It's safe to do so. So we're going to use the one-line install script for convenience. So I'm going to copy this line right here and I'm going to paste it in my Mobax term environment. There you go. So Rclone is installed. Normally, Rclone creates Rclone config file. Sometimes in some distributions it doesn't. So we're gonna see if it did create a configuration file. So cd.config, I don't see it. So we're gonna start creating some folders here. mkdir.config, and we're gonna move to this folder and we're gonna create one more folder, mkdir rclone, which is where all the stuff will be stored for Rclone. We're gonna move into this folder and we're gonna create an empty file called rclone.conf, which is obviously the configuration file. Now we're ready to start creating our first remote. In my case, as explained before, I'm gonna try to mount my Synology NAS using the SMB protocol using Rclone. So let's create the remote mount first, and for this we'll have to use the remote rclone config command, and this presents us with a few options. We don't have any remotes defined right now, so we're going to press N to create a new remote. It's asking me for a name for this remote, so I'm going to call this NAS SMB because it's my NAS and I'm using the SMB protocol. And you're going to see a bunch of different options here depending on what your storage provider is. SMB CIFS is option number 43 right there. So I'm going to press 43 and press enter. Now it's asking me for my host name. I'm going to say 192.168.1.254, which is the IP address of my Synology NAS. Then you're going to see that you're being asked for the username. In my case, it's Anand, so I will type it in. SMB port number, you can leave the default, so just press enter. And we are going to supply a password in this case, so we will say yes and provide the password here. So let me type in. Okay, that was done. For the work group or domain, we're going to leave it at default, so just press enter. For the next one, just press enter, keep going. We don't need to change much here. Do we want to see the advanced configuration? No, I don't think so. We're not doing anything fancy. We'll just say no and see a summary of what we're trying to create here, which is SMB protocol. The host name and the password obviously is encrypted, is not displayed here. And this seems to be right. So we're going to press Y and exit. Now let's quit because we have created the remote. Now we need to mount it. How do we mount it? There is a Rclone mount command, but our objective is that this remote folder be mounted every time we boot. So why not just go ahead and create the systemd script that will mount this folder every time my Proxmox LXC or Ubuntu server boots. So we're going to do that right now. First, let's head over to /media and create some folders. And if I see the contents, you're going to see the cache folder. Remember, this was the mount point that we created in Proxmox as a 256 gigabyte disk. So there should be nothing in it right now. We will use it for Rclone. We're going to create some folders here. So sudo mkdir rclone, and inside the Rclone folder, we're going to create sudo mkdir ds918. You could call this folder whatever you want, but this is where my ds918, which is a Synology NAS model, this is where all the files will be loaded. So I'm going to call it ds918. Now, there is one thing I have to do. I have to change the permissions of these folders, because if I do ls al, you're going to see all the folders are owned by root. So I do not want that because we're going to see some permission issues. So let's change it. Sudo -r on and start. So all folders should now be owned by me, and we're good to go. We're going to start creating the systemd script. Where do you find a template to use for systemd script? If you're not familiar with my GitHub repository, I have a bunch of different things in here, including my working Docker setup for my home server, media server, web server, everything in here. So check it out. And if I go to the scripts folder right there, I'm going to see some examples. If I go in here, systemd script, I'm going to see additional examples right here. This is where I picked it from. There are a few other cool things in here. I won't go into the details. If you know my setup, I do not auto start Jellyfin or Plex or anything, because those containers depend on this Rclone mount. So I have some scripts in here. So if I go in here, you're going to see an example, start media after boot. What this script essentially does is waits for Rclone to mount the required media folders from a NAS, and when they become available, this script kicks in and starts Jellyfin, Plex, and radar and sonar and all that good stuff. So check it out if you're interested. Okay. Then moving on, I already copied the systemd script from here. It's in this file right here. Now, there are a few things that you need to pay attention to. One is the name of the remote. I already renamed it to NAS_SMB, which is what we called our remote. If you remember when we ran the Rclone config command, this is the path where everything will be mounted. So this is correct. So in your case, if you need to change it, you'll have to change it. And then if you remember, our configuration file is in this path right here, the empty file we had just created. In fact, you know what? Let's go over there. Let's go over to cd/config /rclone. Let's check if the rclone config command works. So I'm going to cat rclone.conf, and I am going to see the information on the remote that we had just created. So the rclone.conf file is good. I know you guys really care about me. Don't worry about the password here. It's all dummy. Okay, moving on to the systemd script. There is a log file as well. We're creating the log file in the same folder as the rclone.conf file. You can ignore the rest, majority of it. Notice the allow other command though. If you remember, we changed the fuse config to allow other. So now we're able to use this option here. Then you can leave the rest of the options pretty much as is, except the cache. Okay. The cache is set at 256 gigabytes. If you remember, I set my cache drive for my Proxmox LXC at 256 gigabytes. You can change it. In fact, in my home server, I use about 900 gigabytes because I have a 2 terabyte SSD attached to my Proxmox, and I try to use as much space from it as possible. You can leave the rest as is. The only thing you again need to check is the path to the mount point, which is media/rclone/ds918. I like to have all my files mounted in /media. You can pick whatever path that works for you. Okay, we have the folders created, the cache folder, the mount points, the remote config, everything is done. We're gonna now mount and test it. So if we go to cd/etc/systemd/system, this is where we're gonna create our systemd script. So what we're gonna do is now create a file sudo nano rclone ds918.service. You can again call it whatever you want. And now we're gonna copy over the contents of the file that we just edited and paste it here. Okay, and save and exit. Now we'll have to enable the systemd script. So sudo systemctl enable rclone.service. We've enabled the script. Now is the moment of truth. We're gonna mount this, run this systemd script and see if we're able to mount my Synology NAS. And if we do, everything is good. Sudo systemctl start rclone.service. Ta-da, no error, so it's good. So let's check it out. cd/media/rclone/ds918, and if I do an ls, there you go, I see all my folders. So if I go to data and media, I'm going to see all my media folders. Now I'm able to use this folder to start building my Docker stack. At this point, you could use my Docker media server guide or the traffic guide, or if you really prefer automating the whole thing, you could try out AUTO-TRAEFIK, which is a script that I wrote that can automate a lot of things for you and save a lot of time. But either way, watch out for my next video, which is going to be a big one. Start building the Docker media server stack. So if you like this video so far and want to be notified of the next video when it comes out, like and subscribe to the channel. Again, I would really appreciate it if you do. Okay, in the beginning of the video, I did make a promise. I said I will share with you some of the advantages of using Rclone over a traditional SMB or NFS mount. As I said before, there has been a common misconception that Rclone is only for cloud storage providers. In fact, I was using Google Drive, and who didn't, because Google Drive offered unlimited storage. So I had all of my ISO files in my Google Drive and loaded them up on my server and shared it with the rest of the clients in my home network. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and Google decided to stop offering the unlimited plan. So I moved everything over to my Synology NAS, and here we are. But I continued using Rclone because I really liked it. So I am using Rclone to mount my Synology NAS on my home server. Why do I do it this way? If you have watched my previous video on my home lab, I mentioned that I'm on a mission to reduce energy consumption of my home lab, and my Synology NAS with its 9 disks is the biggest energy consumer in my home lab, or a Simple-Homelab as I like to call it, and I am really trying to keep the disks in a hibernated mode as much as possible. But anytime Plex or any other application tries to access the files from the server, it starts to spin up the disk and everything, and I wanted to avoid this. This is where the Rclone cache comes in. The bigger the size of the cache, the less there will be requirements for the disks to spin up, or in other words, the disk will stay hibernated. And if you're in this environment like I am, where my kids are always watching the same thing again and again and again and again, these files would now be fetched from the Rclone cache instead of waking up my disks into Synology NAS. So I really like it for this reason. The second reason I also like it is that I now have everything self-contained in one Proxmox LXC or a virtual machine if you're doing it that way. Now I can back up the whole thing and move it anywhere, start it back up. It should start right back up without having to depend on some configuration in the Proxmox host or major configuration in the Proxmox host. You still have to enable Fuse, but it's simple enough to do that. So it really helps with portability. And the last thing I really like is also that programs like Radar and Sonar, as they are downloading and moving a lot of different stuff, they also put all of these files in Rclone cache. And if you watch relatively soon enough, Plex or Jellyfin picks up the file from the cache instead of your storage device. So for this reason, I really like using Rclone over SMB or NFS mount the traditional way. There is nothing wrong with the other way as well. This is just my way of doing things, and maybe you guys will like it too. This is the end of the video. I really hope you guys liked it. If you did, like the video, subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to go one level above, I do offer several memberships on my website where I share a lot of different good stuff. So pick any membership level that works for you. And if you subscribe, that would motivate me to do more as well. This is the end. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Go Geek Army.